my name's Philippa Neat and I work for Grammar UK, and the webinar today is to look at the VCSE Energy Efficiency Scheme, and specifically with a focus on the capital grants part of it. So the scheme is to help VCSE organisations across England deliver more efficient services for people and communities by saving money on energy bills. We are Grammar UK. We're a national charity and we support local communities, both through local trusts. So you might have come across our trusts in different parts of the country where we work locally with local communities. We also administer a number of grant programmes on behalf of a number of organisations, really. So Tesco, Comic Relief, government departments. So it's always worth having a look on our website at some of our grant programmes, our other grant programmes, to see whether there's any that can help you with the work that you do. So I've included a link at the bottom. So please do go and have a look at that if you think that would be helpful to you as well. For this particular scheme, we opened in December, so the scheme is now open. I'm going to talk you through more detail about it as we go on, but there's two parts to it. The first, where you can apply for an independent energy assessment, and the deadline for that is coming up Thursday the 20th of June, so just in a month's time. And also for capital grant applications, where you can apply for funding to implement the measures that were recommended in that energy assessment. And the deadline to put in those capital grant applications is Friday the 14th of August. I just wanted to talk you through a bit about the structure of the day. Oh, and sorry, before I do, I should have said at the start that the session's been recorded, and we will put a recording on our website. We will pause at numerous points for questions, but we won't include those questions in the recording. So to start off with, I'm going to talk through just an overview of the scheme, key dates and what funding is available. I'm then also going to talk about eligibility. Even for some of you who've had an IEA through the programme, there is some different additional eligibility criteria for the capital part of the grant. So I want to talk through that. We'll also talk through the prioritisation criteria that we use to prioritise applications for funding if the scheme is oversubscribed. Then I'm going to take you through the capital grant application form, sort of explain the questions, talk about the types of information we're looking for, and explain how you can best answer the questions in the form to have the best chance of getting funding. And the application form asks you to transfer some of the information in your IEA into the form. So we're going to have a look at some of the information you'll have in your IEA and how you need to tell us about that in your application form. We'll then have a look at some top tips. So like I said, what information are we looking for and how can you best write a good application? And we'll pause at 3 points throughout the session for questions. I think there's quite a lot of information, so I think that will work better than sort of saving them all up for the end. So there's a Q&A. Please feel free to pop any questions in the Q&A, and I will pause at 3 points and go through them. Okay, so I just wanted to talk a little bit about how the scheme works and the different stages of it. So we have an eligibility checker on our website. So I would imagine that most of you on this call already have an IEA, because we're focusing more on capital grant applications. But if you don't and you're interested in applying for an IEA, that's your starting point of the process, really. You can do the eligibility checker. It will take you to an IEA application form where you can apply to have an IEA. If your IEA is approved, you can then apply for a capital grant through the scheme. Like I said before, there are some differences in eligibility between IEA and capital grant, which I'll come on to later. So even if you've got an IEA, it will be worth going through the eligibility checker to check you're eligible for a capital grant. Okay, so I just wanted to talk a little bit to start with about what is an independent energy assessment. So I'm sure some of you on this call have these. Some might have had them done through our scheme, some might have had them done elsewhere. It's basically an evaluation of your building's energy usage efficiency and the potential for energy savings. It's conducted by a qualified independent energy assessor, and the things they look at your existing systems, they gather data on your costs and energy usage, and then they provide recommendations of measures that could be installed to save energy and money. They estimate the savings, the cost savings and the energy savings that those measures could make for you, and then outline an action plan for what action you could take going forward. Through our scheme, they're pretty much always done in person. There might be some cases where they can be carried out virtually. So perhaps if you already have an existing one, it might just need a desktop review. But generally, they're carried out in person. They generally take maybe a couple of hours. Someone will come out to your building and work with you to look at all the detail. From our programme, we've got assessors who come out between January and October. And receiving an IEA doesn't guarantee success with a capital grant. Like, we know that we're going to be able to fund more IEAs than we can fund capital grants, but we hope that it'll still provide useful information to reduce your bills, suggest behaviour change, or reduce energy expenditure for your building. Okay, I talked a little bit about the key dates at the start, but I just wanted to re-emphasise them really. So for IEA applications, they will close on Thursday, the 20th of June. So if you have any, if you were looking to apply for an IEA, please get your application in as soon as you can. And the capital grants are open now, and that closes on Friday, the 14th of August. But we are encouraging organisations to apply as early as possible. So although the closing date is Friday, the 14th of August, the scheme is open. You can submit any time. And obviously, the earlier you submit your application, the more time that you have to deliver your project. So all the funds need to be paid out to you by the 31st of March 2025. So we're asking that projects are completed by the 14th of February, and then all claims come into us by the 28th of February to enable to have that period to sort of check them and make the payments out to people. Okay, so a little bit about the capital grant. So the capital grants can be used to install capital energy efficiency measures. They must be identified in your IEA to help reduce your building's energy costs. You can't apply for a capital grant without an IEA. So like I said, it doesn't need to be one that's done through our scheme. You might have one from somewhere else. And we can check that to see if it's got the suitable information. You can apply for grants of between £2,000 and £150,000. And you should use the cost savings to support the delivery of your frontline services. So the application form will ask you to tell us how you're going to use the cost savings that you make. You can only apply once. So if you're unsuccessful, you're unable to put in another application. Okay. I just wanted to talk through a few examples of energy efficiency measures you might apply for. So improvements to the fabric of your building, so more efficient glazing, insulation, thermal doors, water heating measures, so more efficient boilers or heating, lighting, so lighting controls that mean the lights don't have to be on all the time, occupancy sensors that tell you when someone's in a room, LED lighting systems, and renewable energy measures, so such as solar panels. This is an exhaustive list, and in our programme guidance we have a much more detailed list of measures. And it doesn't mean that if the improvement isn't on that list, it's not eligible. It's just to give you some examples of what could be applied for. So there are other capital measures that we can fund, and we can also fund minor capital works to support the installation. So what that means is If you are putting insulation in the wall, it needs to be replastered, things like that. That can also be applied for to us. What we can't fund is like major capital works that would need to be done. Any capital works need to be really linked to that that capital measure installation. And we're also want the capital measures to significantly reduce your energy bills, so to have that evidence that it is going to make some cost savings. So like I said, there's more detailed examples in our programme guidance and FAQ documents. Okay, so I just wanted to talk through the eligibility criteria. So you must be a single organisation. We can't accept joint applications from people working in partnership. And you must have one of the following legal structures. So those are listed there. So you must have charitable or benevolent purposes. If your organisation distributes surpluses, so to your members or your shareholders, then you must have an asset lock, and you must reinvest a minimum of 51% into your charitable purposes. So normally your governing document will explain that, have an asset lock and explain how you reinvest any profits into charitable purposes. This scheme is just for England, so any applicants need to be based and operating in England. And you need to be delivering frontline services or managing a building as a hub that frontline services are delivered from. And what we mean by frontline services is any services that are delivered to the general public or to individuals. So not services that support other organisations. They have to be actually supporting individuals or a community of people. And you must be able to evidence a need for energy efficiency support, so show that your energy costs have increased, that you need support with them. And you must be financially sustainable and likely to continue operating for the next 2 years. So we'll ask for a copy of your accounts, your most recent accounts, just to check that you are financially sustainable. The other thing is there are schemes out there that will fund energy efficiency measures through either loans or blended finance. So blended finance is a blend of a grant and a loan. So what we're asking for before you apply to this scheme is that you've looked into that and decided that that's not appropriate for you at this time. Okay, a few more items of eligibility criteria for the capital grant. The organisation must have been operating for a minimum of 2 years. And like I said, there's some eligibility criteria that's different to the IEA, and that's not a criteria for the IEA. So you might have had an assessment, an IEA assessment through us, but not be eligible to apply for capital. You must have an independent energy assessment, and the energy saving measures you want to apply to us for must be recommended in that. And you must be able to give us evidence that installing the energy efficiency measures will enhance your financial resilience of your organisation or support your frontline services delivery. So be able to tell us how you'll use those savings to improve your delivery. We ask you to provide a financial plan aligned with the payback period of the grant. And I'll talk a bit about payback periods later, but I just want to reassure people it's not about paying back the grant. It's about the time it takes for the cost savings of that measure to pay for itself, really, to pay for the cost of installing it. You must either own your building or you must have 2 years or more on your lease if you're a leaseholder, and we'll ask you to provide documents to evidence it. And if you lease, we'll ask you to submit a building owner permission form from your landlord, from the person who owns the building, just giving you permission to do the project. If you need permissions for your improvements, if you need planning permission, environmental licenses, if you're a church and you need faculty permission, then you must have either have got those or have applied for them before you put your application in. And if you're awarded funding, we will ask you to obtain 3 different quotes from builders or energy professionals outlining the cost of the improvement. So that's just to ensure value for money for the scheme, but also to support organisations to make sure you're getting competitive prices and you're not being overcharged for the work. And you must be able to complete your project by the 14th of February, submit all your claims by the 28th, so that the funds can be paid out to you by the end of March, because all funds on this programme have to be spent by the end of March. There's a few organisations and buildings that are ineligible to apply. So it's aimed at the voluntary sector. So we can't fund statutory organisations such as schools, colleges, universities, any statutory healthcare facilities, hospitals, or statutory organisations such as local authorities, town and parish councils. We can't fund religious buildings that are primarily used for worship, but we can fund religious buildings as long as primarily, so over 50% of the time, those buildings are used for community activities. And we can't fund improvements in domestic buildings. So, for example, any flats or houses that are occupied for personal domestic use by one person or family. Like I said, as well as the eligibility criteria, we know that the fund is going to be oversubscribed. So we also have prioritisation criteria that we're using to help make our funding decisions. So the first one is giving priority to organisations who are directly supporting individuals and communities with critical needs, especially those related to the rising cost of living. And these are the examples from our programme guidance. So services that address poverty, so providing food through food banks or food voucher schemes, warmth through the sort of warm hub schemes, emergency supplies or personal grants, shelter accommodation housing for those most in need, so hostels for homeless people, refuges for women, advice services, so services that offer advice to people around benefits, financial help, housing or legal advice. Services that address specific physical or mental health issues, so disability, addiction, dementia, education, training and employment services that help people get into employment. Or, as I said before, community hubs or centres out of which these services operate. So if you manage a building and other organisations deliver these services from your building, make sure you tell us about everything. It's not just about the services you deliver, it's about what services are delivered from that building. The second prioritisation criteria is organisations for whom energy is the biggest concern. So organisations who spend the highest proportion of their expenditure on energy, and as a guide we're sort of saying over 5%, or delivering frontline services that are particularly reliant on energy. So do you have a beneficiary group who needs the spaces to be warm? Do you particularly use a lot of electrical items in order to run your service? Do you need your building to be open long hours so you have high energy consumption? And the third prioritisation criteria is that the scheme is aimed at micro, small and medium-sized organisations, so those organisations with an annual income of less than $1 million. So it's not an eligibility criteria. You don't, if you have an income of over $1 million, you're still eligible to apply. It will just be that smaller organisations are prioritised. And the fourth one is projects that have the best value for money. So the capital measures that you're applying for, those that will make the largest cost savings, but we look at that proportionally to your organisation's overall expenditure and also the grant amount that's requested. Capital measures that have the shortest payback period. So like I said before, how long it will take the measures to pay for themselves through savings. And I'll talk a bit more about how you can work that out later on. And then those that those where the savings will make the biggest impact on both the organisation and its delivery of services. So how will you use those cost savings to deliver or improve your frontline services? And what will the positive impacts be for your beneficiaries of those savings? The next part I wanted to talk about is the capital grant application form. So if you've had an IEA done through our programme, then you'll receive a link to a capital application form. Now, I do know that some of you might be having some issues with this link in the last couple of days, so I do apologise if anyone's having any issues with that. We are trying to resolve it as soon as we can. So if you want an application starting but you can't do it at the moment, please email us at EES and one of my team will start an application for you. So I do apologise about that. It's just a couple of technical issues over these last few days. But we will, that will pull through the answers that you put in your IEA application form as well. So if you had an IEA through us and you're coming in for a capital grant, you'll be able to have that information. So the bills you uploaded, your governing document, your annual accounts, they'll still be in your application form, so you don't have to upload them all again. You don't need to, you can start a new capital form and just sort of put your answers into that. You can copy and paste answers over, but like I said before, we know that this capital funding will be much more competitive than the IEAs. So in order to have the best chance of being successful, we're advising everyone to relook at those answers, have a look at the programme guidance, have a look at that prioritisation criteria, and make sure you add as much information in as you can. So update your answers, include as much detail as possible to have the best chance of being successful. Okay, so the next slides, I'm going to sort of try and take you through each section of the application form. The first section is just about your organisation and contacts. So, sorry. We need 2 contacts on any application. We need some information about your organisation, so how you're structured, if you're a registered charity or company, your number, how long you've been operating, the number of trustees or managing committee members you have, and we'll ask you to upload your governing document, so either your constitution or articles of association. So just a few tips around this. Make sure that your lead contact can talk about your organisation, the building, the application form, and provide any further information if required. If we've got any questions about your application, the lead contact is who we'll go to in the first instance. So it's really important that they are the best placed person to sort of answer any of those questions. We also ask that for a second contact, who can be contacted if the lead contact isn't around, and really ask that both leads are relatively senior contacts within the organisation so that they're able to provide the type of information that we might need. Make sure any contact details are correct. So obviously we understand that in the time from putting in an application to getting a decision, things can change, people can move on, but we just ask if that happens, just let us know and we can update contacts for you, but just to make sure we've always got someone we can be in contact with. The second section asks you about your organisation and delivery, so the services you deliver. And I mentioned before about the loans and blended finance question. Like I said, there are other funds out there that can fund these type of measures through loans or a mixture of loans and grants. So before you come to us, we want to know that really your organisation needs grant funding for this and that loans or blended finance isn't the right thing for you. There might be some restrictions in your governing document. Your trustees might not think that loans or blended finance is right for your organisation, and you might have been set up to ensure that you can't take any out. Your financial health might not be up to it at the moment, so you might have concerns that you could either be eligible for or repay a loan, and you might already have loans, you might already have debt and just think you can't take any more on at this point. You might not have any assets, so you might not own a building or anything to borrow credit against. And the product you're applying for might not be suitable for a loan or blended finance. And like I said before, you might just feel that you don't have the capacity or the resources or expertise need to sort of go down that route to put all the things in place that you need for that. So there's a link at the bottom to the Good Finance website, and if you've got any questions or you want to look into this more, you can have a look at that, and sort of it'll ask you a few questions about whether your organisation is best placed to go for loans or best placed to apply for grant funding. So please do go and have a look at that. This is the section where we ask you about your frontline services. So we'll ask you, who do you provide them for? And that isn't used in any decision making, but it's just used for us to make sure that the scheme is, we know who's applying, who the scheme is benefiting, and we can check that we're getting a good demographic spread of applications. So we'll ask you if your organisation is open to everyone or targeted at supporting a specific group of people. And there's no right or wrong answer to that question. Like I said, we just want to know who's applying and who's applying to the scheme. So if the way we sort of split this is, if 75% of your beneficiaries share a characteristic, that is targeted at a specific group of people. But if less than 75% share one characteristic, then you're not targeted. So if you're not targeting, you can just tick not targeted. But if you do have a specific beneficiary, that's where you can tell us about it, basically. And then there's some questions which people have touched on in the comments, where you can tell us about the type of services you provide, the estimated number of service users you support, how many hours a week your building's open, and the number of staff and volunteers that you have. I wanted to sort of dwell on question 26 really, because when I talk about the prioritisation criteria around that priority 1, those services, this is the question where we take that information from, and this is the answer that's used to prioritise the applications if we're oversubscribed. So as I said, priority will be given to those organisations directly supporting individuals and communities with critical needs related to the rising cost of living, and hubs from which these services are delivered. So I won't go through the services again, they're there in the bullet points, but just to say, if you deliver any of these services, please make sure you tell us all about them, what you deliver, who to, how often you provide them. If please tell us about all of them, so don't think, well, I deliver 3, but I'll just focus on 1. Make sure you tell us as much as you can about those services you provide. And this question also is asking for other things. So as well as who you support and the services you provide, how do those services address cost of living issues? So how are the people you support affected by the rising cost of living, and how do you support them through it, through your services? And you can also tell us a bit more about what you do, for any partnership working, how you involve the community in designing your services, the impact your services are having, and any new services you're hoping to bring in, or how accessible they are, and any future plans you have. And like I said, this is a question that we'll use to prioritise applications, so it's really important on this one that you write a strong answer and give us as much detail as possible. Section 3 then moves on to look at your organisation accounts and energy costs. So we ask you to upload your most recent accounts. So those are just the most recent ones that you've had signed off, basically. So we do understand that there's always a bit of a lag. So we're just asking for the most recent ones that you have had approved and finalised. We ask for your annual expenditure on organisational running costs, and that's about your organisation running costs, not the building you're applying for. So if you're an organisation that has 3 buildings and you're applying for 1, we still want to know the annual expenditure of your organisation, not the building. And then your annual expenditure on energy costs. There's a question that asks you what percentage of your organisation's expenditure is spent on energy costs. So I've just included this table here as an example for how you can work that out. So you look at everything you spend as an organisation, which gives you a total expenditure, and then you look at the amount that's spent on energy. divide one by the other, times it by 100, and that will give you a percentage that you can include in that question. This is where we also asked you to demonstrate the impact of the increased energy costs. So how have increased costs affected your frontline service delivery, and how reliant on energy are your frontline services? So have you had to sort of deliver services less often? Do you have to provide less services now than you used to because more of your money is being spent on paying for energy? If you do, describe these changes to us and tell us the numbers. So we used to be able to open 3 days a week, and now we can only open 1. We used to be able to offer 5, food bank sessions a week, but now we can only offer 2, or we have to support less people than we used to because we just don't have the funds anymore. Tell us if you're particularly reliant on energy. So you've got a vulnerable client group, and you've got large rooms, high ceilings, you're very reliant on high energy use. And tell us how the increase has impacted your organisation's financial health. So have you had to reduce staff or not be able to take on enough staff that you need because of the costs? Have you had to use some of your financial reserves to pay energy costs? And have you reduced your services? So again, this is another answer that's used to prioritise applications. So make sure you tell us as much as possible about the impact the increased energy costs has had on your organisation and your delivery. We then ask you a bit about the building that you want to install the measures on. So like I said, tell us whether you own it or you have a lease with 2 years remaining, and you'll need to upload that document. And if you lease, you'll need to upload a signed building owner permission form. Now that building owner permission form is in the application form, so you'll be able to download it when you look at your application, and you'll be able to just ask your freeholder to sign it for you. We'll also ask you about permissions. So do you need planning permission? Do you need faculty permissions? Do you need any other permissions? If they're not needed, then there's a question where you can tell us how you know. So we'd have expected you to just make some initial inquiries with the council or with the diocese or with whoever's responsible for those permissions. And if you do need permissions, then you shouldn't submit your application form until you've applied for these. So the application needs to have gone in. We'll then ask you about your project. So we'll ask you to upload your IEA. The question that asks you which measures were recommended in your IEA. So you can just detail those. And a question that asks you what measures you're requesting funding from us for. And every measure that you're requesting funding from us for must be identified in the IEA as a recommendation. If you've not applied to us for some of the recommended measures, that's fine. You don't have to apply to us for everything that's in your IEA, but we just ask that you tell us why. So you might be prioritising things that can be delivered within the scheme's timeframes, prioritising those that are going to save you the most money. You might have funding from elsewhere for some of them, and so you don't need to apply to us for them. So we just ask that you explain that to us so that our panel can understand why you're asking for which measures you're asking for. The questions ask you to tell us your project start and end date. So no project can start until we've approved you and you've accepted your award. You might have some conditions added to your award by the panel that they just want a bit more detail, or they want you to follow up a few things, and those have to be met before you can start. And you must have obtained 3 quotes for the work as well. So in terms of trying to estimate that start date, I know it's always quite difficult, but we aim to give a decision within 40 working days of submitting a complete application. And then you'll need to leave yourself a bit of time to accept the award, meet any conditions, get those quotes to get started. And then in terms of an end date, we're asking that projects are complete on site by the middle of February, to give you a chance to get that final claim into us by the end of February, and to give us a chance to make sure that we pay all of those final claims by the 31st of March. Okay. Also, we talked a little bit about some of the documents that we want you to upload, and I know in the questions someone asked, do we have to use our templates, or can we use our own? So this is our risk register template. So we've provided these just to try and make it easy for people so that you don't have to go away and draft one. We're just asking you to think about the risks to your project. So it might be things like delays to completion, might go over budget, you might have objections to the project. I'm sure there's many more, but we just ask that you set these out here so that we know you've got a good understanding of the risks and you've started to think about measures you can put in place to mitigate them. And that, again, is a template you can download in your application form and submit with it. We also have a I think I missed one somewhere. Sorry, I think I skipped a slide. So there's also a project plan template, and this asks you to tell each measure that you want to install. Tell us a little bit about it, so the spec of it, the number, a bit of detail about the make and model, etc. Who's responsible for delivery and how are they in place? So have you got a contractor yet? Have you done the 3 quotes, or have you got a couple of quotes to help you work out your prices, and you're going to go out and get the 3 quotes later? You need any legal permissions, and your estimated start and finish dates for each one. So we understand that you might have a project start date and a project end date, but within that project there might be little mini start and end dates for each measure. And then this is the financial plan template. This is a really important document, and we've tried here to put a bit of guidance about what to include. So for each energy efficiency measure, put it on a separate row. What are the expected benefits? And you should be able to find that from your IEA. What's the estimated total cost for implementation of each measure? So we generally expect that these would be informed by the costings in your IEA, but we do understand that once you start getting suppliers in and contractors and understand the complexities of the project, those quotes might change. So that's fine. We just ask that if they do, you tell us why. So there's a question in the application form where you can tell us why those costs have changed from the IEA estimates. What we do ask is that the costs in this table match the costs in your budget table in the application form, so that they're consistent and we've got one consistent cost for each measure. We also ask for the estimated annual cost savings. We ask for a total cost savings in question 55 of the application form, but we ask you to break them down in this table. So the total cost, when you add up these columns, should equal the figure you put in question 55 in the application form. The cost savings will be identified in your IEA. Like I said, we do understand that once you actually find out what spec or what type of measure you're getting installed, they may change. And again, if they do, just tell us why. And then we ask that you calculate the payback period. So in order to do that, you take the total cost of the measure and you divide it by the annual cost saving, and that will tell you how many years the payback period is. So not a payback period that you have to pay us back any money, but just how many years your organisation will see that return on that investment. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about how you can find those costs from your IEA. So every IEA will be different, but every IEA should contain this type of information. So you should have the solution, the energy solution that is recommended, the estimated cost for implementation, the estimated annual energy savings, the estimated carbon savings, and the estimated energy cost savings. So these are the figures that you'll need to translate into that financial plan template. The estimated cost for implementation, which may change, the estimated energy cost savings, and the payback period. Like I said, they may differ, and if they do, tell us why in question 55A and question 66A. But what we really need is to make sure they match, the financial plan matches that information you put in your application form. If it doesn't, we'll need to come back to you and query it and find out why. And it will just cause delays to the assessment process. Section 6 is asking you about the impact of your energy cost savings. So how will you use those cost savings to improve your frontline services? So tell us about the expected positive impacts on your beneficiaries. So will you be able to increase or maintain the frequency or quantity of your services? And when you're thinking about that, especially focus on how it's going to improve those services in the programme guidance for the priority services. So maybe you'll be able to support a high number of beneficiaries, and you'll be able to support beneficiaries with more complex needs. Maybe you've got waiting lists of people you just can't help at the moment, and maybe those costs will help you to reduce those. And likewise, what will be the impact of those cost savings on your organisation's financial health? So will you be able to take on more staff, or will it protect you from having to make staff cuts? Will you be able to use savings to improve facilities or repair your building? Are you currently having to use financial reserves to pay energy costs, and will you be able to rebuild those if you're able to make savings? So that's the sort of information we're looking for you to tell us. Again, this is one that's used to prioritise applications, so make sure you give us lots of detail about what you'll do and the impact that it will have. Really important to write a strong answer for this one. And the final section is the grant request. So we have a budget table where you put in the amount of money you want from us, basically. Like I said, please make sure that that cost in that budget table match the costs for your measures in the financial plan. Cost each measure on a separate budget line, so we want to be able to see how much each measure costs individually, not a combined total for a project, and ensure that your costings are robust. So we don't need you to have 3 quotes at application stage, but we do need to know that the grant we give you is going to be able to cover the costs of the project. So research your costs, speak to suppliers, get a quote, get a couple of quotes that will help you know if you're putting in the right figures, basically. Then if you are approved, that's when we'll need you to go out and get those 3 quotes. We're asking that every applicant includes a 5% contingency in your budget, and that's to cover any unforeseen costs. So if costs increase or there's some unforeseen costs that occur on your project. So if it's not needed, then we won't pay it out to you. It will be retained, but it's there in case there are cost increases on the project. And have a think about VAT. Do you need to include VAT in your project costings? Because this is a grant, we won't give you VAT on top of it. So if you want VAT from us, you have to include it in your request. Because there's been some government initiative around charities don't need to pay VAT on the installation of certain energy saving measures, you might not need it for some of your measures. If to be eligible for this, the building must be used for relevant charitable purposes. So have a look into this, and we do have a link in our programme guide, or in our application form, sorry, where you can go to have a look at this and investigate it. If it applies to you, then your builder or installer will remove the VAT. They won't charge you for it. So if you don't need to pay it, then you don't need to include it in your application form. But if you do, please do include it, because we can't increase the grant amount at a later date for VAT. Okay. So I just want to talk a little bit about some additional support we can offer through the scheme if you are successful in receiving a capital grant. And that support can be offered through someone that we're calling a capital enabler, which in real world talk is a person, basically, a person with some knowledge and expertise in these types of projects. So we have a number of partner organisations, including the Energy Saving Trust, the Centre for Sustainable Energy, and if you need some support with your project, we can allocate someone to come and support you with that. So we'd like to offer it to organisations who need it the most. That'll be looked at during assessment. So if you, we'd give it to people who perhaps have less experience in these type of projects, have less capacity to manage it. So perhaps organisations with less paid staff, or organisations where the project is quite complex or quite high risk to be delivered within the timeframes we have available. So you may be allocated someone to support you through the delivery of your project as well. And then I just wanted to talk a bit about some tips for completing your application. So obviously I've talked through quite a lot of tips already, but just to try and summarise it towards the end. Make sure you pick the right lead contact, so someone that can answer our questions if we need questions answering. Make sure you've got a second contact that we can get in touch with if the lead contact isn't around. And make sure the contact details for everyone are correct, and if they change, let us know. It's an online application form on our Flexi Grant system. You can log in and work on it whenever you want, but you can't submit it until all sections are complete. So make sure you save it regularly. If you leave it open and you're not active for 2 hours without pressing save, it will automatically log you out, and you'll lose anything that you haven't saved. So please, every question you answer will give you an option at the bottom of that question to press save. So please make sure you do. We have got as well in our programme guidance a link to a Word document of both the IEA and the capital application form. So you can have a look at that if you want. I know sometimes you need advice from other people on answering the questions, so you can email that to them and ask them to help you with your answers. Provide detail about all the services that you deliver, and especially those that support individuals and communities with needs related to the rising cost of living. So those bullet points that I've gone through in the programme guidance, make sure you tell us as much as you can about how you deliver those services. Tell us how regularly you deliver them, and tell us how your beneficiaries are affected by cost of living and how your services support them. If you manage a hub, make sure you tell us about the services that are delivered from that building, even if they're delivered by other organisations. Explain the impact that the rising energy costs are having on your organisation, how you're affected, how your delivery has been affected. Make sure that any measures you're applying to us for are recommended in your IEA, and that each measure has a cost saving identified and a payback period. Make sure your costs are consistent. So like I've said, the cost that you put in that financial plan must match the information in the corresponding questions in the application form. So always worth a double check. I know it can be confusing when you've got lots of different costs and you're working in and out of an application, but make sure they match sort of as a final check. That would be really useful. If your costs have changed since the IEA, then tell us why, and tell us how you've calculated any new costs that you've got. And tell us how you'll use those cost savings to improve your service delivery, and especially focus on how you'll improve service delivery of those priority services that we're focused on. Like I said, you can only apply once, and if you're not successful, you can't reapply. It's really important that you get your application as detailed as you can. Make sure you've got all the information you need about your organisation and the support you provide. Make sure you've got your supporting documents handy. Make use of any templates provided in the form. So if you fill in our templates, you know you've given us the information we need. Like I said, you can use your own, but we'd probably prefer people to use ours. And if you do use your own, make sure you include the information we're asking for, or we'll have to come back and request it. Be as clear as you can and show us the evidence of what you do and how you're affected. It's always helpful, really, to think that the people reading your application don't know your organisation or the subject matter. And that's really hard sometimes, especially because you know it so well. But see if you can get someone who doesn't know what you do to read your application and perhaps ask you any questions about things they don't understand. Try and be as clear as possible. So who do you support? tell us who your beneficiaries are, what do you do, what services do you offer, where are you based, how do you help people, how do you deliver, and when do you deliver, and try and be as specific as you can. So if you've got data about how many people you support, tell us. If you've got some specific stats or quotes, always helpful to put them in, just to sort of bring your application to life, really. Make sure you know the fund you're applying for. So I know there's been so much information in this presentation. It will sit on our website as a recording, so you can watch it again. The slides will be up there as a PDF you can refer back to. We've got our programme guidance, eligibility criteria and FAQs that you can look at. We've also got a helpline and an email address, which I'm hoping will pop up on one of the next few slides. So please, if you've got questions, get in touch with us and ask us as you're doing your application. And leave enough time. You can only apply once, so make sure you're not sort of rushing to get your application in, especially against that final deadline. If you can get it submitted earlier, that will be really beneficial. Next steps, have a look at our programme guidance and FAQs, and there's a link there to where they are on the website. In the application form, you'll see for each question, we've got some help notes that sort of help you with the type of information you should include. Very similar to what I've talked through today, really, but make sure you read those carefully. Make use of the templates that will sort of guide you as to type of information we need. And these are the details if you've got any questions. So anyone I've said to you today to follow up, please do email us at that EES address, or you can give us a call on the helpline number and one of our team will be able to help you.